Okay, so we've got the battery pack out of the car sitting here on the bench in my garage now, and the first thing is we need to understand what's going on with this battery pack. So what we have here is a Gen 2 battery pack. We've got 28 modules that make up this pack. They are divided into 14 pairs, and the car senses the 14 pairs through some sensing wires that go back to the battery ECU. And that is the smallest denominator that the car can see. When you get this in here, potentially even before you take it out of the car, you're going to want to number these from 1 to 28. This is as if we were looking in the back of the car. So this is the passenger side all the way over to the driver's side over here. And these just go from 1 to 28, alternating positive and negative. Okay, Prius battery conditioning, what is it? Well, I've divided it into 3 steps. First, we have trying to increase the capacity of the modules. Second, we're going to determine which modules are bad and replace them. And then third, we are going to take those modules and we're going to try to match them up to be as even as possible so that this pack functions as close to new as we can get. Now, how do we do that? Firstly, we are going to try to increase the capacity of these modules by running them through a set of discharge and charge cycles using a hobby charger for nickel metal hydride batteries, which is what these are. That cycling of them will run them down close to zero capacity and bring them up close to full capacity, which is theoretically going to get rid of some of that memory effect. Alright, so first let's talk chargers. You have 2 basic options when it comes to taking care of your Prius battery. You have the hobby charger and you have the grid charger. Now, I thought the grid charger, when I heard that term, I thought it referred to a grid of wires that would connect to the individual modules. That's actually not what it is. All it does is connect to the main battery output wires and charges the traction battery off the grid. And the idea behind that is it runs the fan, keeping the whole pack cool, and will continue charging the battery, slowly overcharging it while keeping the modules that have fully charged cool as they are dissipating the excess charge and heat to allow the remaining modules to come up to full charge. And that can be really good to help out if you have maybe a weak pack or you're just concerned about the longevity of your pack. However, if you are already having codes come up for the traction battery, and if you have potentially failed modules, that's not going to do very much for you most likely. And so you're left with the second option, which is the hobby charger. These hobby chargers are designed for RC cars, drones, you name it. They can charge a variety of battery types. We just need ones that will charge nickel metal hydride batteries. Honestly, you can buy just about any charger on the market. They are honestly pretty much all identical. The manuals are the same, the menus are the same. All of these 4-channel chargers and even the single channel chargers seem to be all based on the same chip. So what you're going to want to order is a 4-channel charger that can charge 4 batteries at once. If you get a 1-channel charger, it will take about 28 days to complete this. If you order a 4-channel charger, you can do it in about 7 days. And you'll also want to order some 4mm banana plug to alligator clamp cables. I got these off of eBay. And order those all at the same time so you can hopefully get them and be able to start as soon as your charger arrives. Okay, so let's talk about the process now. After you get your charger, after you've got your cables, let's talk about this. So we've got our bus bars removed. The first step is to take a multimeter and measure the voltages on each individual module and log those in a spreadsheet. That will give you the first indication of the health of the battery. If you have several modules that have significantly lower voltage than the rest, that will probably indicate potentially a failed cell in those modules. And for charging and discharging these modules, you're going to want to charge every other module, just to leave one space in between to prevent heat from building up too much between the two modules. And just kind of make sure you leave some space for cooling there. And you want to leave them all clamped in here because they will swell a little bit. You're going to want to expect that. And so here, let's talk about the settings now in our charger. So as we're talking about charging, we need to understand a little bit about how these chargers work, and that's something that it took me a while to figure out and was a little bit frustrating and stressful. So the way that these chargers sense a full battery and know when to turn off is by something called the delta peak. And what that is as you're charging the battery, the voltage in the battery is increasing. And at some point in that charge cycle, the voltage will level off or slightly dip. And that is what the smart charger is looking for, is that dip in voltage. That's the delta peak. And that is when it says, okay, we're done charging. That's the full capacity of the battery. Now, from the research that I've done, people are saying these chargers are not very well able to sense the delta peak in these modules because these modules are quite unique. And so you can't rely on the charger to sense a fully charged module. And so there's a couple settings that we need to make sure we input to account for that. So the first is we're going to want to set a maximum charge capacity for each battery. It's going to be a charge cutoff. I've seen a few different recommendations. I believe the original capacity, the factory capacity of these was 6,500 milliamp hours. And so the recommendation for the maximum charge is anywhere between 7,000 and 7,500 milliamp hours to account for inefficiency in charging. I have mine set at 7,250 milliamp hours, and I will say a lot of the modules are just cutting off there at the top. Some are sensing the delta peak and cutting off there. You just want to make sure you have that in place so that if it doesn't sense that delta peak, it won't just continue to charge and charge and charge and charge. The second setting is that I've recognized that it is easier for the charger to sense the delta peak at a higher amperage charge. So there is a charge setting within this charger that lets you decide how fast and how much amperage you want to charge these modules with. I initially was charging with 2 amps as a slower charge, kind of a trickle charge, and none of the delta peaks were sensing. And at some point I realized that upping the amperage of the charge might fix that, and so I upped to 5 amps, which is what I saw recommended in a different video, and that caused a lot of the delta peaks to be sensed and the voltage to be cut off there, which has really helped. So I would recommend those two settings, setting your cutoff charge capacity to 7,250 milliamp hours, and then setting your charge to a 5 amp charge. Okay, so for the discharge settings, you are going to want to discharge at the fastest rate possible, which is going to be probably 1 amp if you have one of these standard 4-button chargers. That's the maximum on mine, which in reality ends up discharging at around 0.6 to 0.7 amps. And then the second setting that you need to define for the discharge is the target voltage and how low you want it to discharge. I've seen recommended around 6 volts, I think up to 6.3 and down to 5.8. I've been discharging mine down to 6 volts, and that seems to work just fine, so that's what I would recommend. And so then you're just going to go through, hook up your leads, somewhere here, going every other module, and start your charge. So what we have on the screen here, this is just telling us the battery type. Right now, this is discharging. When it switches to charge mode, these two will switch and the C will be charging. This is telling us the amperage at which it's discharging. When it is in charge mode, that's going to tell you what it's charging at. This is telling us the voltage of the module, and then this is telling us the milliamp hour capacity of the module as it's charging up. And then this is telling us the time that it has been on this cycle. These modules will swell just a little bit as they're charging. I didn't find it to swell very much when I was charging at 2 amps, but at 5 amps they do swell a decent amount. That is why it is important to make sure you leave them clamped in this whole package while charging. Because if you don't, they will become damaged and you can't actually do anything with them anymore. Just a tiny bit of swell on either side, but I don't think it's anything to be concerned about. It's something that's expected on these, and it goes right back down after they're done charging. Okay, so when charging finishes, you will see these numbers on the screen. It'll tell you this discharge milliamps and then the charging milliamps. This is probably a bad cell because it's showing really low discharge capacity. And then if we here press the increase button, it'll bring us up to the second charge and the third charge, and you can notice that each of these is ending sooner than 7,250, which means that it's detecting the delta peak and stopping the charge automatically, and so it was able to continue through all 3 charge and discharge cycles without me having to restart it. And so what we're going to do is we're going to, now that we've finished that module, we're going to move these over to the new one. I'm just going to move these all the way up to number 28. So you can see we're selected on number 1. We've got the cable from number 1, and we're just going to go all the way over to number 28 with this one and hook that on to the negative. And we're going to take our positive cable and run it all the way over here to the positive. So with those charging leads hooked up, now with all this displayed, we just hit the stop button to just tell it that we're done with that. So we're hitting that stop button, and then it brings you back to the menu. And so now all of these buttons are just controlling the settings for this single channel, which is channel number 1. And so when you're setting this up initially, you're going to want to go to you're going to want to continue pressing this stop or select button until you get to the user set program option. You're going to hit OK or select or enter over there, and then you're just going to cycle through this. And we're going to leave the delta peak at default because it's already sent for NIMH. It's basically by default, I believe, set to the most sensitive, which on this machine is 5 millivolts per cell. It won't go any lower. And that doesn't matter. This doesn't matter because we do not have a temperature probe hooked up. The waste time between the charging and discharge, I've heard anywhere between 15 and 30 minutes. I think I'm going to up this to 30 minutes just to be safe. And then a safety timer, I think we're going to, that's probably not going to get hit. So we're just going to go ahead and turn that off. And this is the capacity cutoff is what we want to set, and so you see we have that on and set to 7250 milliamp hours. People recommend setting that anywhere between 7,000 and 7,500. So I've got it pretty much dead in the middle there. And then these are just settings for the machine, which don't matter, and that doesn't matter unless you're running it off a 12-volt power supply, which I don't have to. I've just got it plugged into the AC outlet there. And we're back to the beginning. So now we're just gonna go through this and go back to NIMH battery, and we're gonna hit enter.
and right here is where you set your charge limit, the current limit on the charge. And so first thing is you're going to want to set it to automatic. At least on mine it was set to manual, and to do that you hit enter and get it sets flashing, and then you hold the decrease and increase buttons together and it switches. And so you're just going to want that on automatic, and that will have it automatically sense the delta peak instead of hitting that cutoff every time. Now I have seen recommendations for 1 amp, 2 amp, all the way up to about 5. 5 seems to be pretty common, and from my experience, if you have it set for 2 amps, you are very rarely, if ever, going to catch any of the delta peak cutoffs, and therefore you're going to be running this up to the full 7250 cutoff limit every single time, which then also means you're going to have to be restarting the charger for every discharge and charge cycle. At 5 amps, A, it goes a lot faster, and B, it also will trigger the delta peak cutoff for the automatic charge cutoff, which is really convenient because that means that more of these modules are going to be able to complete 3 entire discharge and charge cycles without any input from you. So we are going to leave that at 5. You want to set the discharge rate to the max, which I think on all these 4-button chargers is 1 amp. And then I've seen anywhere between 5.8 and 6.3 recommended for the discharge voltage to target. I am using 6 volts just because I think I saw that somewhere and it seems to work for me. You want to be careful about how low you go on this. I don't think below 5.8 is probably a good idea, although I'm not really sure. And this is just basically what voltage it's going to aim to discharge your module to before recharging. Okay, and then we're back here. If you have pulled your pack out of a running car, then your modules are probably all pretty much fully charged, so you're going to want to do a discharge charge cycle, meaning it's going to start by discharging them because they're already charged. And so you would just select this until you get to the discharge charge, and then set the number of cycles. It looks like this will go up to 5. 3 is how many I've been doing on all of mine. And then you just hold this button and there we go, it starts. And so it's going to tell you the voltage, current voltage of the battery, and it'll tell you that it's discharging, and this is the time that has elapsed on the cycle. And then what I've seen on mine is they generally discharge at about 0.7 amps per channel. And we're just going to leave this with this fan going on this full time, and come back out a bit later and see how it's doing.
All right, so let's talk about some expectations to have with this charger. There were a few things about this that I wasn't expecting and didn't understand, and they were a little stressful. So first off, I've consistently seen the voltage in these modules rise above 9 while they're charging. They drop back down to mid to low 8 volts after they've completed charging, but during charging they've gone as high as about 9.2 or 9.3, and that was really scary because I was like, that seems way too high for these 7-volt modules to be up at 9. A lot of people were saying the max voltage on these should be like around 8 or 8.2, 7.8 was decent. But while charging, they do rise above 9, and I think that makes sense. I know if you measure the voltage on a vehicle battery, you can get up to 15 volts on a 12-volt battery while that is charging. So I think that 9 volts is just fine while they're charging. But just be aware that you're going to see that on the display here while these modules are charging. And then the other thing is, I was really expecting the smart charger to be able to catch the delta peak and automatically turn off the charging when they were full on these modules, and it was not doing that. and I think you should just expect that. Expect it to pretty consistently get up to your safety capacity that you've set on these modules, because that's been my experience, especially at 2 amps. At 5 amps, it's been a little bit better. All right, so the next thing that was a little bit scary to me was I was scrolling through the menu on this thing and looked at the input power voltage, the in power voltage, and it's telling me that it's got 15.67 volts coming in. And that was a little scary because I'm thinking, wait, these are 6 volt or 7 volt cells and you're charging them at 15 volts? And you know, that combined with some other things was leading me to be a little scared. However, what I realized later on is that these chargers are designed to be run off a 12 volt battery, and so what that voltage is telling me is just whatever voltage is coming in off the transformer that's plugged into the wall voltage is 15.67. So that's just the power coming into the charger, not the power going out to the modules. And so that was a bit of a relief because I was a little scared there. All right, and you know, maybe the one last thing I'll mention is in these charge cycles, there'll be times where the charger stops for a period of time, and what you'll see on the screen here is it'll say dry, DRY. And wasn't quite sure what that was, didn't know if that meant that there was something wrong with the module or what was going on. All it means is that the charger has stopped for a period of time, and there'll be a timer indicating how long it's stopping for. And that appears to just be a function of the charger that, you know, when it gets down close to the cutoff voltage of the discharge, it often does that dry stopping charge just to allow the voltage in the module to rise back up, and then it's going to discharge again to try to get it as close as possible to that final discharge voltage. And then it also does it as it's trying to catch the delta peak. If it senses something, it'll stop charging and just kind of wait and see what that voltage does, and then potentially charge a little bit more or end the cycle, whatever that is. But if you see dry on there, doesn't mean you have a bad battery, just means it's pausing the charge for a second to do something with the charging cycle. Okay, so what I'm starting with on my battery pack is I am doing 3 discharge charge cycles for each module, and after which I will move on to a heavier load test. And those discharge charge cycles take about 9 hours each. And so that's why it's pretty imperative to have a 4-channel charger to be able to go 4 at once. These 4-button chargers, I think pretty much all of them have the ability to do multiple charge cycles at once. I think up to 5 on this one. And so I've been setting mine for each module just to do 3. But there's a couple things you got to keep in mind, and this was also confusing for me, that if the charger reaches that cutoff capacity of 7250, that ends the cycles. It won't continue on to do the next one because that's kind of like a safety cutoff. And then the second thing is if you have a timer, like a maximum time cutoff in here, and it hits that, it will also end the charge cycles. So I was kind of under the impression that, you know, that 7250 was for the individual cycle and would continue the following cycles, but it will just end the discharging right there when it hits that. It is ideal to be able to have it sense that delta peak. That's why, you know, another reason why 5 amps of charge is preferable, because you can, for quite a few of these modules now, I've been able to get that full 3 cycles with the charger sensing the delta peak, which has been really convenient.
All right, so what we're looking at here is my chart, and I will provide a template chart for you if you're interested in taking a look at it. I'll provide a link. But over here on the left side, we have the voltage that we initially tested. Right here we have our initial discharge down from whatever the charge state was when it was sitting in the car. Then we have our first charge cycle. Then we have our discharge, charge, discharge, charge. And so what we're doing is at the end of every charge cycle and discharge cycle, we are going in and we are recording the capacity that it was discharged, and that will be listed on the screen of the charger. And so we can see here at the end, I basically made these kind of show up in these colors to show the strongest ones, which are these ones with the higher capacity, and then we kind of get down to mediocre capacity and then really bad capacity. And you can see the ones that we are replacing in this pack are these ones that had a failed cell. You can see that when I let these sit overnight, the voltage dropped to 6.3. So I'd recommend doing a resting voltage check after you remove it from the vehicle. Let it sit for a little while, then test your voltages again. And then we have that initial module that was failed right here in block 12. That was 6.74 volts. And I did not even continue trying to charge it. Our initial capacity was like 140, and so just decided we're going to replace that one for sure.